Hello and welcome to this new video on strings and dictionaries. Now this lesson will cover again two important types. Strings we're already familiar with, dictionary is something that we need to look into. Strings we'll just look at the little more depth because it hasn't got the attention it deserves yet. So let's start. We'll start with strings and then move on to dictionaries. Now one place where the Python language really shines is the manipulation of strings. Okay, has very powerful inbuilt functionalities to manipulate strings. Now this section will cover some of Python's built-in methods and formatting options. Now such string manipulation patterns come up often in context of doing data science work. That's why we are covering this. Again, remember, we are doing all of this in the context of data science, right? So string syntax. We've already seen plenty of strings in all of the previous examples, but just to recap, strings in Python can be defined either by using single quotes or by using double quotes. So this is an example of a string. This is the example of the same string. And then I can run Boolean operations on it. You'll see that they will be true because it doesn't matter what quotes you use, right? Now double quotes are convenient if your string contains a single quote character. Okay. So let's say I want to represent an apostrophe. Okay. United Network Professionals video. Okay. So in that case, I need to keep a single quote character inside a string. In that case, just use double quotes. Okay. So Pluto's is a planet. Okay. Let me just rephrase. Pluto's surface is code. Let's see. Yeah. Makes for a little more grammatical construction. Okay. So Pluto's surface is code. Okay. So that really justifies the need for the apostrophe. And in that case, if I were to use only single quotes, look at what is happening to the syntax here. It's going all over the place. It's treating the apostrophe as the end of the quote that I started, and then everything's just a full mess, right? So if I replace that with double quotes, everything falls into place. Okay. And then if I have the reverse, so let's say I want to double quote or put someplace in quote, maybe for more emphasis or for sarcasm, whatever that need is, right? So my dog is named Pluto, and this time I want to print the double quotes. So what do I use? I use single quotes, right? So we'll have to use them intelligently and interchangeably so that our objectives are met, right? So if you look at the first one, I managed to print the single quote. If you look at the second one, I managed to print the double quote. Okay. So if we try to put a single quote character, we've already seen this, so I'll just skip through it. Okay. Now, if you're really a stickler for standardization, it's like you want to put a single quote in a string that is declared by single quotes. This is possible, right? So let's say you have a string where you need both single quotes and double quotes. Let's say we have a sentence like, Vivek's voice is very loud. Let's say it's something like this. Okay. Now how do I represent this as a string? Let's try it with single quotes. Vivek's voice is very loud. Now if I try this with single quotes, doesn't make sense because the single quotes is getting close to the moment I start the apostrophe, right? So this won't work. Let's try with double quotes. Vivek's voice is very loud. Okay. Again, does not work because the moment I start this single quote, it actually treats that as the end of the first double quote that I just specified here, right? So how do we do this? In comes escape characters to the rescue. So this one will be called an escape character. It's represented by a backslash, the one that is above the return key on your keyboard. Okay. So what do? I simply escape this. I tell Python, look, I know it's a double quote, but do not treat this double quote as the end of this double quote. Do not use your own syntax on this. Just escape these two. Okay. So if I escape it, can I use it now? Yes, I can. Okay. Now, can I do the same thing with single quotes? The answer is yes. So if I just replace the whole thing with a single quote, then I don't need to escape the double quotes now. what I need to do is just escape this single quote and tell Python that, look, treat it literally. Do not treat this as syntax for closing this. Okay. So again, if I print, I get the same result. Okay. So those are the two examples on escape characters. So let me just do a quick cleanup, and the same thing has been depicted here. Now, the third thing I'd like to point out is there are certain liberties that you can take inside a string to represent different structures. Okay. So for example, let's say hello world, and the thing separating these two looks something like this. So if you say /n, it has a special meaning in Python. It goes to the next line, makes a new line. So if I print this, hello will get printed on the first line, world will get printed on the second line. Okay. So if I do that, you see this /n has a very specific meaning. If I do a /t, then it will get separated by a tab. It's almost like writing hello tab world. Okay. So these two words will be a little apart from each other. Let's quickly test that out. And there we go. Okay. So again, remember /n and /t have special meaning when they are put inside strings. Okay. Now it turns out if you want multi-line strings, so let's say there's something like this. Okay. Now you can see the moment I change the line, it loses its syntactic color, right? So how do I do multi-line strings? We've seen this before. They're called doc strings or with triple quotes. Okay. So see, the moment I wrap this whole thing up on triple quotes, everything just falls into place. The syntactic colors are back and it'll print whatever I've written here. Okay. So that's one more thing worth noting. Okay. So multi-line strings can be represented by triple quotes. So there we go. Now, again, we've seen this before, so I'll quickly skip through it. The print functionality automatically adds a new character, and we've seen this before, right? So if I do print hello here and the print world here, they will get printed in two separate lines. But if I specify an end character as space, then these two will get printed on the second line. So hello and world get printed in two different lines, whereas hello and Pluto get printed in the same line. And again, if I put a space here, they will be spaced apart. Okay. So you can play around with that in order to efficiently print what you're trying to print. Okay. Now let's discuss indexing. We've seen in the previous video that you can treat a string as a list. So obviously you can index and traverse a string just like a list. So if I have the string called Pluto, the first element or the 0th index will be capital P. Okay. And then I can do all of the slicing that we have discussed in lists, and this will print the last three characters of this particular string. Okay. I can access the length, and then I can do list comprehensions on strings. Okay. So again, for character and planet, I can add an exclamation to each of it. Okay. But let's say I want to replace the first element of the string planet by B. It won't allow me to do that. And just FYI, planet.append won't work either. Okay. So it gives me a type error. String object does not support item assignment. So I can't assign individual places, just like I can do in a list, individual indices, values. Okay. Again, this goes to show that strings, like tuples, are immutable. Okay. Now, I can take this string and do a dot upper. Again, we've seen this before, and it will just capitalize everything. And then if I do dot lower, it will lowercase everything. Now, if I want to search for a particular substring inside a string, so you see, the claim is Pluto is a planet, and then if I search for plan, then I'll get a hit here, right? And this will tell me how many characters apart is this particular element. So that's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10, 11. After 11 characters, I get this particular substring, right? So the index will give me the address of the first index that has a match with this particular substring, okay? And then I can check if the claim starts with the planet. So this basically means this has a value of Pluto is a planet, and then starts with is checking whether this particular string is starting with what is stored for the value of planet or not, okay? So the planet is Pluto, the claim is Pluto is a planet, so this will evaluate to true, okay? If it doesn't, if I just write random gibberish, this will evaluate to false, okay? So there we go. Now, if you have a starts with, obviously you can also have an ends with. Ends with dwarf planet, probably not, because my claim is a planet, right? But then if I say just a planet, I'll get a hit. Oops, because it ends with an exclamation mark. So my apologies. If I just put that in place, I should get a true here, right? So in the next section, let's evaluate going between strings and lists with split and joins, okay? Now, in this section, we are going to learn a bit about both, about lists and strings, because they have so many commonalities between them, right? So string.split turns a string into a list of smaller strings, breaking on white space by default. This is super useful when you're trying to take a big sentence and then splitting them up into words, for example, right? So what was claim again? Let us see what's the value of claim. The value of claim is Pluto is a planet, right? Now if I do claim.split, this is again, I'm taking a string and I'm applying a dot split on it. What will happen? It will split by default with the white space character. So it will split here, here, and here, and give me a list of elements where each element is a word. So 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. It will give me a 4-element list with each word on it because it's splitting by white space. Now, there can be that you want to split sometimes anything apart from a white space, right? Again, coming back to data science, we play with dates a lot, and then you might need to break down a particular date by the year, month, and day, right? Date, right? So in that case, what you are going to do is you're going to take this string and then do a dot split on it, and then instead of specifying nothing in the brackets, which again resulted to white space as a default, I'm going to explicitly state my delimiter based on which I want the split to happen, and this will give me a 3-element list which I can unpack like so into 3 separate variables, year, month, and day. Okay, so if I check the value of these 3 variables, year, month, and day, I will get the 3 split values of the date. Now let's say I want to change the date format, right? I want to go from hyphen to slashes. So what do? Now it's kind of reversing the split. It's called dot join, okay? So I take a delimiter of my choice. I want, in this case, to join the year, month, and date by the slash. So I do slash dot join month, day, year, okay? So this time I'm not only changing the delimiter but also changing the format, because originally it was year, month, day, and this time I'm doing month, day, year. So this will yield 01-31-1956 slash. So all of it separated by slash 01-31-1956, right? So that's the desired output, okay? You can even go crazy and put Unicode characters like emojis. So I can take this as my delimiter and then do a dot join on word.upper for word in words. So remember, all of our words, what they were, when we did a split, they were Pluto is a planet. I have 4 elements in the array called words. So for each word, it is going to join it by this. So potentially what we'll have here is Pluto spaced by the emoji is spaced by an emoji, a space by an emoji, and planet, and all of them are capitalized because I've applied an dot upper here. Okay. Now let's discuss building strings with dot format. Okay. So this is a way to concatenate 2 strings. We know this, right? So take a planet, the value of planet is Pluto, Pluto, we miss you. Okay. Now, what if I want to concatenate an integer with a string? So let's say the number of planets is, and then I concatenate 8 here, right? What will this give me? An error. Okay. So it won't be able to concatenate strings and integers. Okay. So one way to do it obviously is to cast it to an integer, of course, but this time we'll learn formats. It's a way more elegant way of doing it. Okay. Now, again, like I said, if you do this, it'll throw an error. So we've seen this. Now we'll do a string cast. This also works. We've seen this already. So I'll just execute this. Now we'll use format. Okay. So format is special syntax in Python where certain elements in a string can have special meaning. Okay. So curly brackets, you'll always be the curly brackets planet to me. And then I do a dot format, and then I provide as many variables as there are curly brackets. So what will happen is this planet will go sit here, and then this position will sit here. Note that position is an integer. Okay. So it wouldn't have worked with concatenation like we've already seen before. And if you have multiple integers you want to shove in between a bunch of sentences, this just gets a little involved and inelegant to look at, right? So use the dot format, and this position will go sit on the second pair of curly braces because this occurs second. So it's very positional in nature, and this planet will come here first. Okay. So Pluto, you'll always be the 9th planet to me, right? So it's way more cleaner. Now, I can do more stuff to it. So let's say this is curly brace number 1, this is curly brace number 2, this is curly brace number 3, this is curly brace number 4. Okay. And for all 4, I have variable 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Provided 4 variables to go and sit on those 4 places. But there's something funny going on over here, right? So what this is telling me, and this is where format comes in and starts being very powerful, right? This is telling me that, look, expect a float, but then if there are more than 2 decimal places to that float, you just round it off to the second place of decimal. Okay, so this will round off to the second place of decimal. This will round off to the third. This will round off to the 3rd place of decimal, and then this will separate the whole thing by commas. So what do I mean by that? This particular variable, if it is a large number, let's say in the millions, then it will comma separate a large number and represent it more cleanly. So let's just execute this. So if you look at it one by one, Pluto has this mass and it doesn't let more than 2 decimal points here. Okay. And then this is again not more than 3 decimal points with a percentage sign here. And then finally, this large number over here is represented very cleanly with commas. Okay. So again, format is not just representing strings, but having more control over how you want that represented. Okay. Now, again, quickly you'll see that if you have a lot of variables sitting here, it's hard to kind of order them in the perfect manner. So what we also have is positions. So what you can do is you can specify a 0 here, specify a 1 here, specify a 0 here again, and specify a 1 here. What we were looking at previously is if you have 4 curly braces, you better have 4 variables here, right? That's not necessary. So I'm saying there will only be 2 variables that I will provide to you as an input, and then I can position those as I please. So I want the first input that I provide to come sit here, the second input that I provide to come sit here, the first input that I provide to come sit here on the 3rd position, and then the second input goes and sits in the 4th position. Then if I do this, you'll see that the whole thing gets printed properly, right? So this was what we had to discuss with respect to strings. See you on the other side of the video for discussing dictionaries.